My son cut me out of his life for 20 years. Wouldn't talk to me. Ignored every attempt I made to contact him until I got rich. Suddenly, he invited me to Christmas like nothing ever happened. But I had a plan. When I arrived at his house, I smiled and said, "I've got a surprise for you." Their faces lit up with greed, just waiting for my money. But when they saw what I had prepared for them, their faces went pale, and their smiles vanished. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The phone rang just as I was settling into my evening routine. The sharp sound cut through the December silence of my city apartment like a knife. I almost didn't answer. Telemarketers had a nasty habit of calling right at dinner time, but something made me pick up the receiver. "Dad?" The voice hit me like a sledgehammer. 20 years of silence. And now this casual greeting, as if we'd spoken yesterday. "Ryan." My voice came out steady, even though my knuckles had gone white around the phone. "This is unexpected." "Yeah, well," I could hear that familiar nervous laugh, the one he used as a kid when he was caught in a lie. "Listen, I know it's been a while, but Christmas is coming up, and Sarah and I were talking. We'd love for you to come over for dinner. You know, family time." Family time? The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked at the faded family photo on my kitchen counter, the one where Ryan was 8, with a gap-toothed grin before everything fell apart. "A while?" I couldn't help the edge in my voice. "Ryan, you haven't returned my calls in 2 decades. Remember the birthday cards I sent? The graduation announcement I mailed you? They all came back, returned to sender, unopened." "Dad, come on, I've been busy. You know how it is. Building a career, starting a family. Never enough time." Never enough time. I stood up, pacing the small kitchen. Outside, Christmas lights twinkled mockingly in the neighbors' windows. But suddenly, there's time now. Right after the news of my lottery win hit the papers, there was a pause, just a little too long. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't?" $15 million. Front page of the local paper last month. Quite a coincidence, this sudden invitation. "Dad, it's not like that. I mean, I'm happy for you. But that's not why I'm calling. We just thought it would be good to reconnect. You're getting older, and I'm getting older." I almost laughed. "I've been getting older for 20 years, Ryan. Where were you when I had heart surgery? When I spent Christmas alone in this empty place, year after year?" His voice shifted, becoming defensive. "Look, I know things haven't been perfect between us, but that's in the past. We're family. That's got to count for something." Family. The word hung between us like a bad omen. I thought of all the times I'd sat by this very phone, willing it to ring, all the unread messages, the returned letters, the birthdays spent in silence. "You're right," I said finally. "Family does count for something. I'll be there." "Really? That's great, Dad. Christmas Eve. Around 6 p.m., I'll text you the address." "You do that." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "And Ryan, I've got a surprise for you." "A surprise?" His voice perked up, and I could practically hear the dollar signs in his tone. "What kind of surprise?" "You'll see." I hung up before he could reply. I set the phone down gently, my hands trembling slightly. The kitchen felt different now, charged with possibility. Outside, it had started to snow, blanketing the quiet city streets in white. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, my mind racing back to the last time I'd seen my son's face. It had been so long, but some wounds never really heal. They just wait, buried under years of quiet dignity until the right moment to surface. I walked to the window, watching the snow fall, and I remembered how it all began. The snow reminded me of that December 20 years ago, when everything I'd built came crashing down. I'd been sitting in the same kitchen, though the apartment felt different then, warmer, filled with the promise of a family. Sarah had been packing, her suitcases scattered across our bedroom floor like open wounds. "You're pathetic, Arthur." Her voice echoed in my memory, sharp and cruel. 45 years old, and what do you have to show for it? A dead-end job, a mortgage we can barely afford, and dreams that are never going to happen. I remembered standing in the doorway, watching her fold clothes with mechanical precision. I thought we were happy. "Happy?" She'd laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "When was the last time you surprised me with anything?" When was the last time you took me somewhere nice? Richard treats me like Richard, her new boyfriend, the one with the luxury car in the corner office who had been calling our house for months before I finally caught on. What about Ryan? I'd asked, grasping at straws. He needs stability. He needs his father. He needs a father who's a winner. She'd snapped the suitcase shut. You've just been one disappointment after another. The divorce was fast and brutal. Sarah's lawyer was expensive. Mine was overworked and underpaid. She left with the house, the car, and our son's loyalty. I moved into this small rental in the city, starting over at 45 with nothing but my accounting job and the bitter taste of betrayal. Ryan was 18 then, old enough to choose a side. He chose hers without hesitation. Mom's right, he said during one of our last conversations, his voice cold with teenage certainty. You're just making excuses. Maybe if you'd tried harder, been more successful, none of this would have happened. I tried to explain, to make him understand, but his mind was made up. The stepfather had money, influence, connections. What did I have? A small apartment and a broken heart. 20 years of silence followed. 20 years of unopened birthday cards, of calls that went straight to voicemail, of Christmas mornings spent alone in this quiet apartment. I'd learned to live with the emptiness, to find meaning in small things, my work, my books, the occasional kindness of neighbors. But I never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that one day my son would remember the man who taught him to ride a bike, who stayed up all night with him when he had pneumonia, who loved him unconditionally, even when that love wasn't enough. Then came the lottery. $15 million after taxes from a ticket I'd bought on a whim at a convenience store. The story hit the local news, then the state papers. Within a week, my phone had started ringing off the hook. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years, distant relatives I'd forgotten existed. And then, today, the call I had been both waiting for and dreading. I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder I'd been preparing for months. Bank statements, investment records, legal documents, everything I would need for Christmas Eve, everything I would need to show my son exactly what kind of man his father had become. The snow fell outside, blanketing the city in a pristine white. Soon, very soon, I'd have my chance to give Ryan and Sarah the surprise they'd been waiting for. But something told me it wouldn't be exactly what they were expecting. I smiled to myself, closing the folder. 20 years was a long time to wait for justice, but I'd learned that some things are worth the wait. The isolation had been my teacher, though I didn't realize it at the time. After the divorce, when the loneliness settled into my bones like the city's winter chill, I needed something to fill the endless hours. That's when I discovered my gift for numbers, not just the accounting kind, but the kind that could build empires from dust. It started with a foreclosure notice I saw in the local paper back in Otter 8. A small duplex on the south side, nothing special, but the price caught my eye. While everyone else was running scared from the housing market, I saw an opportunity. I drove past the property on my lunch break, noting the solid frame under the peeling paint, the overgrown yard. That night, I spread newspaper clippings on my kitchen table, their yellowed edges curling in the lamplight. Mortgage rates, property values, market predictions. I devoured them all like a starving man. The old wooden chair creaked under my weight as I leaned forward, scrawling calculations on the backs of utility bills. Are you sure about this, Mr. Collins? The bank manager had peered at me over his glasses, skeptical. Real estate is a dangerous game right now. I'm sure. I'd signed the papers with a steady hand, though my heart was pounding. It was every cent I'd saved since the divorce, plus a small loan against my modest 401k. The duplex became my evening project. I'd drive over after work, tools rattling in my trunk, and spend hours scraping paint, fixing leaks, replacing rotted boards. The physical labor felt good, purposeful. For the first time in years, I was building something instead of just surviving. 6 months later, I had tenants, good people, a young couple just starting out, grateful for clean walls and working pipes. The rent covered my mortgage with a small profit left over. I immediately reinvested, buying another property, then another. The Great Recession was my gold mine. While others were losing fortunes, I quietly built mine, one careful purchase at a time. I learned to read neighborhoods like books, to spot potential where others saw only blight, The midnight calculations became routine, spreadsheets glowing on my computer screen, tracking income and expenses with methodical precision. By 2015, I owned 12 properties across the city. By 2020, 23. I lived in the same small rental, drove the same reliable sedan, wore the same modest clothes, but underneath the surface, I was accumulating power, the kind that comes from smart decisions made in patient solitude. The lottery win had been luck, sure, but it landed on a foundation I had built through discipline and grit. 15 million added to what I had already earned through sweat and strategy. I was worth more than Ryan could possibly imagine, more than Sarah would ever believe possible. I checked the clock. Almost midnight. The snow had stopped, leaving the city wrapped in a pristine silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that the quiet man they'd written off as a failure had become something else entirely. Did Ryan know the full extent of what I'd achieved? Did he understand that his father was not just lucky, but smart? I doubted it. In his mind, I was still the broken man who'd lost everything 20 years ago. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to turn loneliness into strength, failure into triumph. The apartment settled around me with familiar sounds. I had work to do, plans to finalize. Christmas Eve was coming, and I intended to be ready. The morning came with fresh snow dusting the windows. I was nursing a coffee at my kitchen table when the phone rang again. The sound made me pause, mug halfway to my lips. 2 calls in 2 days, after 2 decades of silence. Arthur. Gee. Sarah's voice hit me like a cold wind, still holding that same breathy tone she used when she wanted something, though age had hardened the edges. I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Ryan. I set my coffee down carefully. Sarah. What a surprise. Listen, I know things ended badly between us, but we have a son together. That has to count for something, right? Ryan's in trouble, Arthur. Serious trouble. He needs help. And I thought, well, with your recent good fortune. I could hear a muffled sound in the background, whispering. Then Ryan's voice, faint but clear. Ask for more. Tell him it's urgent. What kind of trouble? I kept my voice neutral, though my grip tightened on the receiver. His business. You know how it is. The startup world is so volatile. He's got investors breathing down his neck, and if he doesn't come up with the capital soon, she let the sentence hang in the air. I hate to ask, but could you help? For old time's sake, more whispering. Say it's for the grandkids' future. It's for the grandkids' future, Sarah continued, her voice taking on that pleading quality I remembered from our marriage. You wouldn't want them to suffer because of some business problems, would you? I watched the steam rise from my coffee mug, thinking of all the times I'd fallen for this routine. The manufactured crises, the emotional manipulation, the way she'd always known exactly which buttons to push. How much? I asked. Well, $200,000 would cover the immediate problems, but if you could stretch to $300,000? Another whisper. Maybe $400,000 just to be safe. I almost laughed. $400,000 tossed out as casually as asking to borrow a cup of sugar. I see. Arthur, I know you're angry about the past, but this is bigger than our problems. This is about family, about doing the right thing. The right thing? I repeated the word slowly. Tell me, Sarah, what was right about 20 years of silence? What was right about returning unopened birthday cards? What was right about teaching our son to treat his father like a stranger? Her voice hardened. That's ancient history. We're talking about now, about your son's future. I won't give you a dime. The words came out cleaner than I expected. No anger, no bitterness, just a fact. What? She sounded genuinely shocked. Arthur, you can't be serious. You want millions of dollars. What's a few $100,000 to help your own son? Not one dime, I repeated. Not now, not ever. But you love him. You're his father. How can you abandon him when he needs you most? I thought of all the times I'd needed them, all the ignored attempts at contact. I learned from the best. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I don't think I will. The line went dead. She'd hung up on me, just like that. I set the phone down and watched the snow continue to fall outside my window. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of resolve. I had passed the test. 20 years ago, I would have written the check, desperate to buy back their affection. But the man I'd become understood something the old Arthur never did. Respect can't be bought. And love that comes with a price tag isn't love at all. I finished my coffee and began planning my next move. It was still a few days until Christmas Eve, but I had a feeling my son and his mother weren't done with their little scheme. That was fine. I'd waited 20 years for this moment. I could wait a little longer to see just how far they'd go. The phone sat silent on the table, and I found myself almost hoping it would ring again, because every call made my Christmas surprise just a little bit sweeter, a little more justified. They thought they were dealing with the same broken man who'd lost everything decades ago. They had no idea who they were really up against. Sleep eluded me that night. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The morning light cast long shadows on my kitchen floor as I sat with my coffee, staring at the phone. One more test, one final confirmation of what I already suspected. I picked up the receiver and dialed Ryan's number, my fingers steady despite the weight of what I was about to do. "Dad?" He sounded surprised, maybe even pleased. "Didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I've been thinking about what your mother said yesterday, about your trouble." "Oh, that." His voice shifted, growing warier. "She probably made it sound worse than it is. You know how she worries." I leaned back in my chair, watching the winter wind rattle my windows. "Actually, Ryan, I called because I have some trouble of my own." "Trouble?" "Financial." I let the word hang in the air, noting the change in his breathing. "I'm afraid I made some terrible decisions with my lottery winnings. Got into crypto trading, you know, those digital currencies everyone was talking about." "Oh, no." But his tone wasn't one of sympathy. It was calculating. "How bad is it?" "Pretty bad. I lost most of it in a market crash last week. Volatile investments, they warned me, but I thought I knew better." I paused, letting him absorb this fiction. I might have enough left to cover Christmas dinner, but not much else. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the phone line. I could almost hear his thoughts shifting, recalibrating. "Well," he said finally, his voice colder than a frozen pipe. That's really unfortunate, Dad. I guess these things happen." "They do." I waited, giving him a chance to offer comfort, support, anything that might resemble concern. "So, about Christmas," he cleared his throat. "Maybe it's best if you don't come this year. I mean, with everything you're dealing with, you probably need to focus on getting your finances straight." There it was, the mask dropping completely. "I see." I kept my voice neutral, though inside I felt a cold satisfaction. "So the invitation is off the table? It's just, you understand, right? Sarah's been planning this big dinner and we were counting on, well, anyway, it's probably for the best. Less stress for everyone." "Less stress?" I nodded to myself. "Of course. I wouldn't want to be a burden." "Dad, don't be like that. It's just practical. When you get back on your feet, we'll definitely get together." "When I get back on my feet?" I smiled grimly. "Right. Look, I've got to run. Conference call in 5 minutes, but we'll talk soon, okay?" The line clicked dead before I could answer. I set the phone down and looked out at the city's snow-covered streets. 20 years of silence, and the moment they thought I was broke again, we were right back to silence. I knew it would happen, but having it confirmed so bluntly still stung. Not because I was surprised, but because it crystallized everything I'd suspected about their motives. Love with conditions wasn't love at all. It was a business transaction. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the cold glass. Outside, my neighbors were already starting their day, warming up cars, shoveling driveways, normal people living normal lives, probably taking for granted the simple fact that their families loved them for who they were, not what they had. The test was complete. The jury was in. Now it was time to plan the sentencing. With that clarity, I spent the afternoon researching the lives my son and ex-wife had built while ignoring mine. If they wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules. I started with my old network from my real estate days. A few phone calls revealed some interesting information about Ryan's startup, or rather, its spectacular failure. "Brooks Tech Solutions?" laughed James Miller from the Chamber of Commerce. "That kid burned through investor cash like confetti, promised revolutionary software, delivered nothing but excuses and expensive lunches." "What about the investors? Not happy. Word is he owes close to $2 million between the VC firm and private backers. Some of them are getting lawyers involved. I took notes on a legal pad, my accountant's mind automatically organizing the data. $2 million in debt. That explained the desperation. The internet provided the rest of the puzzle. Ryan's LinkedIn profile showed a string of failed ventures, each lasting just long enough to secure funding before collapsing. His social media painted a picture of a lavish lifestyle. Expensive restaurants, flashy cars, designer clothes, all financed with other people's money. But it was Sarah's Facebook profile that truly turned my stomach. Her page showed a woman playing the victim with masterful precision. Photos of herself looking tired and wan. Posts about her brave battle with cancer. Chemo Day 47, read a post from last month. The treatments are exhausting, but your donations are keeping me fighting. Every dollar helps with the medical bills and experimental treatments my insurance won't cover. I scrolled through months of similar posts, each more manipulative than the last. Thousands of dollars in donations from well-meaning strangers, all based on a lie. Because I knew Sarah wasn't sick. She was just greedy. A quick check of the main hospital's records, through a contact who worked in administration, confirmed my suspicions. No cancer treatments, no chemo. Not even a suspicious mole removal. I cross-referenced her posts with Ryan's social media spending sprees. The timing was too perfect. Every major donation spike coincided with Ryan posting about a new business opportunity or an expensive purchase. They were working together, a mother-son tag team, bleeding strangers dry while ignoring the man who had actually earned his wealth through honest work. I compiled everything into a folder, the same methodical approach I'd used for my real estate investments, bank records, social media screenshots, testimony from scammed investors, a paper trail that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud and emotional manipulation. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wrote me off as a failure, a man not worth their time or attention, but that same man had built a fortune through patience and strategy, while they had built nothing but debt and deceit. I closed my laptop as night fell on the city, the glow of the screens fading into the dark. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new pieces of the puzzle. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. I wasn't the victim in this story anymore. I was becoming the author. The phone rang again, likely another desperate attempt to squeeze money from their rich father. I let it ring, listening to the sound echo in my quiet apartment. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Christmas Eve was still days away, and I had work to do. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in white, clean, pure, and ready for a fresh start. Dawn brought focus. I reached for the phone before my morning coffee was even finished brewing. Yesterday's research notes were spread across my kitchen table like a battle plan. It was time to see just how deep my son's greed ran. Ryan answered on the second ring. "Dad? This is unexpected. Twice in 2 days?" "I've got good news," I said, settling into my chair. "Remember that crypto investment I told you about? The one that wiped me out?" "Yeah." His voice held a note of weariness, as if he suspected where this was going. "Well, I managed to get most of it back. Day trading, you know. Bought the dip and rode it back up. Turned out better than I expected." The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. I counted. "That's fantastic, Dad. I'm so relieved. I was worried about you." The lie came so easily to him, not a trace of shame or embarrassment for how quickly he'd discarded me when he thought I was broke. "So, I was thinking," I continued, "maybe Christmas is back on, if the invitation still stands." Of course it does. Sarah will be thrilled. She's been looking forward to seeing you." Another lie. I could hear the calculations clicking behind his words like an old cash register. "Actually, Dad, speaking of Christmas," his voice changed, becoming more intimate, more son-like. "I know it's awkward to bring up, but since you mentioned your financial recovery, I was wondering if you might consider helping me with something." I smiled grimly. "Oh? It's this business opportunity. Time-sensitive, you know, the kind of deal that could set me up. But I need to move fast. $300,000 would cover my buy-in." $300,000, not a loan request, a demand wrapped in the language of opportunity. "That's a significant amount, Ryan." I know. But Dad, this isn't just about me. It's about securing the family's future, your grandkids' future. And honestly, after everything that's happened between us, I thought this could be a way to, start fresh. The manipulation was stunning in its audacity. Family, grandkids, fresh starts. All the buttons he thought would work on the man I used to be. "Tell me more about this opportunity," I said, injecting just enough interest to keep him talking. "It's in the tech sector, AI development actually, revolutionary stuff. The initial investors are projecting 500% returns in 18 months. The same pitch he'd likely used on his previous victims. I wondered if he even bothered to change the numbers. 500%? That sounds almost too good to be true. "I know it sounds crazy, Dad, but that's how these breakthrough technologies work. Remember when those digital currencies were nothing? The people who got in early made fortunes." I let the silence hang between us as if I were genuinely considering it. In truth, I was marveling at how completely he'd exposed himself. No mention of paying me back, no acknowledgement of the 20 years of silence, just his hand, held out, palm up, waiting. "I'll need to think about it," I said finally. Of course, but Dad, time really is a factor here. The window closes after Christmas, so if you're going to do this, we'd need to move fast." The urgency was manufactured, of course. Create pressure, remove time for second thoughts, classic con artist tactics. "I understand. Let me sleep on it. That's all I can ask, and Dad, thanks for even considering it. It means the world to me." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, watching the morning sunlight glint off my notepad. He'd taken the bait completely. No suspicion, no questions about how I'd recovered my losses so quickly. Just pure, unadulterated greed. I picked up my pen and wrote a single word. Confirmed. 20 years of silence. And now he wanted $300,000, based on a 5-minute phone call. The audacity was almost admirable in its shamelessness. Almost. I checked my watch. The workday was just beginning, and I had other calls to make, other pieces to put in place. Ryan thought he was playing me, but he had no idea the game had already started. With that bait set, I turned to the contacts I'd compiled during yesterday's research. The investors Ryan had scammed deserved to know where their money had gone, and where the man who'd taken it was hiding. I started with the VC firm first. The receptionist put me through to a Mr. Johnson, who sounded tired, even at 9 a.m. "You're calling about Ryan Brooks?" His voice sharpened. "What's your connection to him?" "Mal." "I'm someone who believes in accountability," I said carefully. "I understand he owes your firm a considerable amount of money." "Considerable is an understatement. We're talking straight-up fraud. But he's vanished. No forwarding address, no contact info. Our lawyers are stumped. And if I told you I know exactly where he is?" Mr. Johnson's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "I'm listening. He's in the city, hiding out at his mother's house, planning his next scheme." I provided the address, the phone number, and the social media evidence I'd gathered. Mr. Johnson's excitement was palpable. "How do you know all this?" "Let's just say I have a vested interest in seeing justice served." After Mr. Johnson, I contacted the 3 private investors Ryan had named in his failed company's registration documents. Their reactions were remarkably similar. Initial skepticism, followed by barely contained rage as I provided proof of his whereabouts. "That little weasel," snarled Susan Clark, who'd lost $50,000 on his solar panel startup. "I knew he was hiding somewhere. My lawyer said we'd need a PI to track him down." "Consider the PIs tracked," I said. "I'm also sending you proof of his current lifestyle. Social media posts showing expensive purchases, restaurant visits, luxury items, all while claiming bankruptcy." By noon, I had contacted 7 investors. By 2 p.m., they were forming a class action lawsuit. By 3 p.m., they had a conference call scheduled with their legal teams. I sat in my home office surrounded by papers and screenshots, listening to my phone buzz with updates. Each call brought more satisfaction than the last. "Mr. Anonymous," said Mr. Johnson when he called back, "I don't know who you are, but you've given us exactly what we needed. We're filing emergency motions to freeze his accounts and seize any assets we can find." "How quickly can you move?" "We're talking days, not weeks. Christmas might get very interesting for Mr. Brooks." I filed Mr. Johnson's business card with the others, creating a neat pile of consequences. For 20 years, Ryan had lived without facing accountability for his actions. That was about to change. The phone rang again. This time, it was Susan Clark. Our lawyers are coordinating with the others. We're going to hit him from every front simultaneously. No more games. I'm glad I could help. One more thing, she said. When we find him, and we will, I want to thank you properly. You've given us hope when we thought it was all lost. I hung up and looked out at the city streets where my son thought he was safe, where he thought he could continue his schemes without consequence. The snow had stopped, leaving the world sharp and clear. Perfect visibility for what came next. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the local news station. If Ryan wanted to play with other people's money, maybe it was time the city knew what kind of neighbor they had. With the alliances forming, I drove out the next afternoon to gather the last piece of proof I needed. The main hospital sat on the west side of town, its brick facade dusted with snow. I parked in the visitor's lot with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The automatic doors hissed open, releasing that familiar antiseptic smell that always reminded me of my own heart surgery, the one Ryan hadn't bothered to show up for. I walked through the lobby, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors, past families clutching flowers with worried expressions. I found Laura in medical records, a woman I knew from my accounting days when I'd handled the books for her late husband's practice. She looked up from her computer in surprise. "Arthur, what brings you here on a day like this?" "Hello, Laura. I need a favor, and I know this is a delicate area." Her expression shifted to one of caution. "What kind of favor?" I pulled out a business card from Mr. Johnson's firm. "I'm assisting with a fraud investigation. There's a woman claiming to receive cancer treatments she never had, collecting donations under false pretenses. It's hurting real people." Laura studied the card, then looked back at me. "Arthur, you know I can't just—" "It's Sarah, my ex-wife." The words tasted bitter. "She's been running a scam on social media, claiming chemo treatments that never happened. Good people are sending her money they can't afford because they think she's dying." Something changed in Laura's eyes. She'd always been a woman who valued honesty over bureaucracy. "This stays between us," she said quietly. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my car reviewing the printouts. A clean bill of health for the last 5 years, routine checkups, dental cleanings, a minor sinus infection last spring. Not a single oncology appointment, no chemotherapy, no cancer diagnosis of any kind. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on the papers as I read every detail. Each page confirmed what I already knew. Sarah's entire cancer story was a fabrication. Every donation, every message of sympathy, every prayer sent her way was based on an elaborate lie. I tucked the records into my coat pocket, feeling their weight against my chest like armor. The drive home through the quiet city streets gave me time to process what I'd found. The snow was falling steadily, blanketing the world in white, making everything look clean and new. For a moment, stopped at a red light, I wondered if I was crossing an ethical line. These were private medical records, obtained through personal connections rather than proper channels. But then I thought of the families sending $20 bills they couldn't spare, believing they were helping a dying woman fight for her life. The light turned green, and I drove on. Sometimes, justice required getting your hands a little dirty. Back at home, I placed the records in my folder, alongside the investor information and the lawsuit confirmations. 3 separate angles of attack, all carefully orchestrated, all perfectly timed. Ryan and Sarah had spent 20 years believing they were smarter than everyone around them. Christmas Eve, I'd put that theory to the test. I looked out my kitchen window, where the Christmas lights twinkled in the neighbors' yards, and I allowed myself a smile. The holiday season was about to get very interesting for the Brooks family. The phone rang one more time that night. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing it would be Ryan or Sarah with another urgent request or a manufactured crisis. But their time for making demands was running out. After tomorrow, they'd be too busy dealing with the fallout to bother their poor, forgotten father. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled in to review my plans one last time. Christmas Eve was just hours away. Christmas Eve arrived, crisp and clear. I prepared myself for what would be the most satisfying holiday in 20 years. I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, and drove across town to the address Ryan had texted me weeks ago. The house was in a new subdivision, all vinyl siding and identical landscaping, Christmas lights strung unevenly on the porch. I could see shadows moving behind the windows, probably Sarah fussing over last-minute preparations, while Ryan counted the imaginary profits from his fake investment opportunity. I rang the bell, composing my face into what I hoped looked like grandfatherly enthusiasm. "Dad!" Ryan swung the door open, his arms wide, as if we'd had weekly dinners for years instead of total silence. "You made it! Come in, come in!" Ishel. Sarah appeared behind him, thinner than I remembered, but with the same calculating look in her eyes. "Arthur, oh, it's wonderful to see you. You look prosperous." I stepped into their warm living room, noting the expensive, mismatched furniture, the oversized TV, the designer handbags tossed carelessly on chairs, all bought with other people's money. "Thank you for inviting me," I said, handing my coat to Ryan. "I brought something special for later. A surprise for you both." Their eyes lit up immediately. "A surprise?" Sarah clasped her hands together. "How thoughtful." We sat down to dinner at a table that could have fed 12, laden with dishes that looked impressive but tasted like they'd come from the supermarket deli. Ryan carved the turkey with a theatrical flair, while Sarah refilled wine glasses and peppered me with questions about my recovery from the crypto losses. "So lucky you managed to bounce back," she said, not quite meeting my eye. "These market swings can be so unpredictable." "They certainly can," I agreed, cutting my turkey into precise pieces, "but I've learned to be more careful about who I trust for financial advice." Ryan launched into a detailed explanation of his AI investment opportunity, complete with projected returns and time-sensitive urgency. I nodded along, asking just enough questions to seem interested, watching their faces grow more animated with every perceived sign of my willingness to invest. The knock on the door came just as Sarah was serving dessert, loud, authoritative, the kind of knock that meant business. Ryan frowned, setting his fork down. Not expecting anyone. He walked to the front door, Sarah and I trailing behind. Through the window, I could see a man in a dark coat holding an envelope. "Ryan Brooks?" the man asked when the door opened. "Yeah? You've been served." He handed the envelope to Ryan and turned to leave. Ryan stared at the papers, his face draining of color as he read. This can't be right." "What is it, honey?" Sarah peered over his shoulder. "It's a lawsuit, multiple lawsuits. The investors, they found me." His hand was shaking as he flipped through the pages of legal documents. Emergency asset freezes, restitution claims, criminal fraud allegations. How did they even know where I was? His voice cracked slightly. I kept my expression one of concerned grandfatherly shock while inwardly savoring every moment of his panic. "Oh no," Sarah said, her hand flying to her mouth. "Arthur, what terrible timing, right during Christmas dinner." "These things have a way of catching up to people," I observed mildly. Ryan was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. "I need to call my lawyer. No. I need to get out of here. They could freeze everything. The house, the accounts, everything." "How much do they want?" Sarah asked, her voice thin. $2 million, plus damages, plus interest." He looked like he was going to be sick. Sarah turned to me, that familiar look I remembered from our marriage, the one that appeared whenever she needed something expensive. "Arthur," she said carefully, "I know this is awkward, but Ryan, our son, and with your recent good fortune, perhaps you could help with the legal fees, just until this gets sorted out?" She reached for her phone, probably to start calculating exactly how much she thought she could squeeze out of me. I smiled at her, the same patient smile I'd worn through 20 years of her manipulation and disdain. "Actually, Sarah, I think you're going to have bigger problems than legal fees very soon." She looked up from her phone, her thumb hovering mid-dial. "What do you mean?" "I know someone who specializes in fraud cases," she said, her voice taking on that determined tone I remembered. "A friend from social media, a brilliant lawyer. She handles this kind of thing all the time." She opened her phone and navigated to Facebook, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. I watched her face, knowing what was coming, but curious to see how it would unfold. The first notification badge showed 97-plus messages. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but she wasn't worried yet. Popular people got lots of messages, especially during the holidays. Then she started to scroll. "What the hell?" she whispered, her face going pale as she read. The phone trembled in her hands. "Sarah, what is it?" Ryan leaned over her shoulder, the lawsuit papers forgotten. They're saying I faked having cancer. Look at these comments. Fraud, scammer, disgusting. There are hundreds of them. I sipped my coffee and watched the spectacle. She scrolled faster, her breathing growing shallow. There's a news article. Local woman exposed for fake cancer scam. How? Who could? Ryan grabbed the phone from her and read aloud. Anonymous source provides medical records proving Sarah Brooks never received cancer treatment, despite collecting thousands in donations for chemotherapy costs. This can't be happening. Sarah's voice broke. Someone hacked my medical records. This is illegal. Is it true? Ryan asked, his voice deadly quiet. Of course it's not true. I'm fighting cancer. You know I'm fighting cancer. But even as she said it, I could see the doubt seeping into Ryan's eyes. He was many things, but he wasn't stupid. The medical records were too detailed, too official to be faked. Oh my God, Mom, oh my God, do you know what this means? They're going to investigate everything. My lawsuits, your donations, all of it. Sarah's phone buzzed with another notification, then another. The messages were flooding in now, former donors demanding refunds, reporters requesting interviews, authorities asking questions. Make it stop, she whispered, staring at the screen. Make it stop. I can't make it stop, Ryan snapped. You did this. You brought this on us. I didn't do anything. Someone set me up. They turned to me simultaneously, as if suddenly remembering I was there. Their faces were a mask of desperation and hope, the same look I'd seen countless times when they'd needed something from me. Arthur, Sarah said, her voice turning syrupy despite the panic, you said you had a surprise for us. Please, tell me you brought what we discussed, the money for Ryan's investment. We need it now more than ever. Ryan nodded eagerly. Dad, I know this looks bad, but we can fix this. With your help, we can hire the best lawyers, the best PR firms. We can make this all go away. I stood up slowly, setting my coffee cup down with deliberate care. Their eyes tracked my every move, hungry, desperate. Actually, I've already delivered your surprise. The words hung in the air like smoke. I walked to the coat rack and put on my jacket, taking my time with each button. What do you mean? Sarah's voice was sharp with rising panic. I mean exactly what I said. I've already given you both exactly what you deserve. But the money? Ryan started. There is no money. Not for you. I walked to the door, their confused voices following me. Arthur, wait, you can't just leave. We need to talk about this. But I was already turning the knob, stepping out into the cold night air. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off their pleas and protests. I walked to my car without looking back, though I could see the warm glow of their living room window in my peripheral vision. Inside, they were probably still scrambling, still trying to process what had just happened, still believing they could manipulate their way out of the consequences. The engine turned over smoothly, and I pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I saw a figure appear in the window. Ryan, probably, watching me disappear into the dark. 20 years of silence, 20 years of disdain, 20 years of being treated like I didn't exist. Now they knew exactly how it felt. The days turned into weeks, and the reports trickled in through the city's tight-knit network of gossip and concern. The story had legs, as they say in the news business, and it traveled far. Laura from the hospital called first. Arthur, I hope I did the right thing. The authorities contacted me about those records. Turns out, someone had tipped them off anonymously about the fraud. I'm sure you handled it appropriately, I said, stirring sugar into my morning coffee. The local news picked it up, then the state papers. Something about the story just grabbed people, maybe the audacity of faking cancer for cash. Other updates came through casual run-ins at the grocery store, small talk with neighbors, bits and pieces of information that painted a picture of systematic collapse. Ryan's legal battles had been swift and brutal. The investors, armed with evidence and fueled by righteous anger, had presented an ironclad case. The judge had shown no mercy for someone who'd stolen retirement funds and college savings to finance a lifestyle of lies. He lost everything, reported Tom Ramirez, whose law firm had handled some of the paperwork. House, car, bank accounts, had to move back in with his mother, if you can believe it. But Sarah's situation was arguably worse. The cancer fraud had struck a public nerve in ways Ryan's investment schemes never could. People could understand bad business, but faking a terminal illness crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Her Facebook page had become a wasteland of furious comments and demands for refunds. The local news had run a follow-up story about how her fake treatments had coincided with miracle cures she'd been promoting, suggesting she'd been profiting from desperate people's hope in more ways than one. Fraud charges are likely, mentioned Caroline from the library, where I'd started volunteering on Tuesday mornings. The DA's office is taking it seriously. But the most satisfying update came from an unexpected source. The mail carrier, a young woman named Jess who'd been following the story, stopped by with a package and couldn't help but share what she'd seen. "Delivered a stack of certified letters to that address yesterday," she said, meaning Ryan's house. Legal documents looked like. The woman who answered the door. His mom, I think. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. I thanked her and went inside, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades. Complete peace. The spring that followed was a revelation. I discovered that freedom from resentment was like recovering from a long illness. Suddenly, the world had color again. I took my first real vacation in years, driving up into the mountains, staying in small towns where no one knew my story. In another state, I met a retired teacher named Margaret who told me about her volunteer work with literacy programs. By the time I returned to the city, I'd signed up to help adults learn to read. It felt good to be building something instead of just tearing down. The community center where I volunteered was full of people who had faced real challenges, job loss, family trouble, health scares, and had chosen to move forward instead of back. Their resilience put my own struggles into perspective. "You seem different," observed Father Martinez from the local parish, where I'd started attending again. "Lighter, somehow." He was right. The weight I'd carried for 20 years had been lifted, leaving room for things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. Books, long walks, conversations with people who valued honesty over profit. I still lived in the same modest apartment, still drove the same reliable car, but now these things felt like choices rather than limitations. I had more than enough money to live anywhere, do anything, but I'd found that satisfaction came from different sources than I'd expected. One afternoon in May, while planning a trip to visit the Grand Canyon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ryan's number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to his message, a rambling, disjointed apology mixed with subtle requests for financial help. I deleted it without a second thought. The next morning, I packed a bag and loaded my car with maps and guidebooks. The Grand Canyon could wait. First, I was going to drive over to the next state, where I'd heard about a small town that needed help rebuilding after a tornado. It felt good to have somewhere to go, someone to help. It felt good to be needed for the right reasons. As I pulled out of my driveway, I glanced back at the apartment where I'd spent so many years waiting for a phone call that never came. I understood now that I'd been waiting for the wrong thing all along. The road ahead was empty and full of possibility. I hit the gas and drove toward whatever came next, leaving the past where it belonged, in the rearview mirror, getting smaller with every mile. If you like this story, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for listening.